Our singer is called Josephine. Those who have not heard it do not know the power of singing. There is no one who is not carried away by his singing. This must be valued because our race, in general, does not love music. Stillness is our most beloved music. Our life is difficult, and we cannot, even when we try to detach ourselves from all the daily cares, rise to things as far away as music. However, we do not complain, we do not go that far, we consider that our greatest virtue is a practical cunning, which we certainly need with extreme urgency, and with the smile of that cunning we usually console ourselves for everything, even longing for the happiness that perhaps produces the music, but this does not happen. But Josephine is the exception. She loves music and also knows how to communicate it. She is unique, and when she leaves us, the music of our lives will disappear, who knows for how long. I often wonder what really happens with that music. Since we are null for that art, how do we understand Josephine's singing? But Josephine denies our understanding, perhaps we only believe we understand her. The simplest answer would be that the beauty of this song is so great that even the most clumsy senses cannot resist it, but that answer does not satisfy. If that were the case, one should have, immediately and always before that song, the sensation that something resonates in that throat that has never been heard before and that we can hear because Josephine, and only she, enables us to hear it. But precisely, in my opinion, it does not happen like that. I do not feel that, and I have not noticed that another felt something similar. In intimate circles, openly confess that Josephine's singing is nothing extraordinary as a song. Is it even a song? Although we do not feel music, we have traditions of singing. In the ancient times of our town there was singing, the legends tell it, and even songs have been preserved that, by the way, no one can sing anymore. We have, then, a certain notion of singing. Josephine's art does not correspond to this notion. And is it art, really, or even singing? Isn't it, perhaps, squeak? By the way, we all know how to scream. It is our peculiar vital expression and not an artistic ability. Many of us scream without realizing it, without even knowing that screaming is one of our characteristics. If the truth were that Josephine does not sing but squeals, or barely exceeds our common squeal, perhaps her strength does not reach that of any worker who whistles all day in addition to his work. If all this, I repeat, were true, it would be refuted thus what Josephine presents as her art, but then the riddle of its great effect would have to be solved. Because it's not just a scream that she emits. If you move a bit away when Josephine sings in the middle of other voices, and you try to recognize hers, you can only hear a vulgar squeak that is barely distinguishable for its delicacy or weakness. But if one is in front of Josephine, it is not only that. To feel her art it is necessary to see her as well as hear her, and even if her song were reduced to our daily shriek, here is the strange thing, that one solemnly prepares herself to do a vulgar act. Cracking a walnut is certainly not a difficult art, and for this reason no one would dare to convene an audience, and to amuse them they would start cracking walnuts. But if someone does it and succeeds, there will be something in their execution above that art, since we all possess it, and it might even suit the effect of the new nutcracker to show himself to be less skilled at cracking nuts than most of us. Perhaps the same thing happens with Josephine's singing. We admire in her what we do not admire in ourselves, otherwise, she fundamentally agrees with us. I was present once when someone, as often happens, timidly referred to the popular squeal, and that was enough to irritate Josephine. I have never seen a smile as scornful and arrogant as his. She, who on the outside is delicacy personified, remarkable for this reason even in our town, so rich in such feminine types, she, with her great sensitivity, noticed that that smile was vulgar and controlled herself, but she denied any connection between her art and the common squeal. For those of contrary opinion he has nothing but contempt and, probably, unconfessed hatred. This is not vanity, because those opponents, among whom I somehow count myself, admire her no less than the crowd, but admiration is not enough for Josephine, requires special admiration. When one is in front of it, one understands it, it is only from afar that they attack it, in front of it one knows that what it screams is not screaming. Since screaming is one of our unconscious habits, it could be assumed that Josephine's audience also screams. We are satisfied by his art, and we squeal when we are satisfied, but his audience does not scream, it is mute, silent as if it participated in the long-awaited peace from which our screaming separates us. Does her song entrance us or the solemn silence that surrounds her weak voice? It happened, once, that a random little mouse innocently began to squeal while Josephine sang. Now, that scream was identical to the one Josephine made us hear. On stage, the scream still weak, despite the singer's mastery, in the public the involuntary screams, it was impossible to distinguish. And yet we hissed and hissed at once to silence the intruder, even when it was not necessary, for she herself, realizing it, would have dragged herself out in fear and shame, while Josephine sang her triumphant shriek and raged, with arms outstretched and neck stretched. For the rest, she is always like that. Any trifle, any contingency, any setback, a creak in the floor, a gnashing of teeth, a flaw in the lighting, seem appropriate to him to enhance his singing. According to her, all ears are deaf, and although she does not lack approval and enthusiasm, she has long since given up on being truly understood. That is why interruptions and annoyances suit him, everything that from outside opposes the purity of his song and that, in an easy fight or even without a fight, can be overcome just by facing it, can help to awaken the crowd and teach it, if not understanding, a religious respect. If small things serve him well, how much more big ones? Our life is very restless, every day brings us surprises, fears, hopes, frights, it would be impossible to bear it without the support of comrades, but still it is very difficult. Sometimes thousands of backs stagger under a load destined for just one. So Josephine believes that her time has come. Soon the weak being is ready, with the chest vibrating in an alarming way, as if it gathered all its little strength in singing, as if it were undressing and giving itself entirely to the protection of the good spirits, as if being enraptured within the song, so little life would remain outside the music, that a slight cold breath could kill it. And seeing this, those of us present tend to say, he can't even scream well, it's frightening how violent he is, not to sing, let's not even talk about singing, but to reach more or less the usual scream. It seems so to us, and yet this inevitable impression is fleeting and very soon we are submerged in the sensation of the crowd that, holding its breath, listens timidly, in warm proximity. And to gather around her this crowd of our people, so wandering, Josephine almost always only needs to throw her head back, raise her eyes and slightly open her mouth, signs that announce her intention to sing. You can do this anywhere you like, even if it's in a randomly chosen corner. Immediately the news spreads and the procession of his devotees begins to attend. But sometimes impediments arise, as Josephine prefers to sing in times of excitement, when care and needs disperse us along multiple paths, and then, despite the best will in the world, we cannot meet as soon as Josephine wishes. And she remains for some time in her grand attitude, without a sufficient number of listeners, and then she becomes truly enraged, stamps her paws at the ground, curses unvirginally, and even bites. But such conduct does not even damage his fame. Instead of trying to curb her exaggerated claims, everyone secretly tries to satisfy her. They send messengers along all the roads to bring listeners and are seen hastening those who arrive with their gestures. This task continues until a passable number is gathered. What drives the people to take so much trouble for Josephine? It is a problem no easier to solve than Josephine's own song. It will be said that the people are unconditionally addicted to Josephine because of her singing. But this is not the case. Our people are incapable of unconditional adherence. It is a people that, above all, loves innocuous cunning, childish and innocent talk that barely moves its lips. Josephine herself knows that, and she fights it with all the strength of her weak throat. Of course, we should not go so far with such reflections. The town is subject to Josephine, but up to a certain point. For example, he is unable to laugh at her. He comes to admit that there is a lot of ridicule in Josephine. Despite all the miseries of our life, we laugh easily. A slight laugh is peculiar to us. But we don't laugh at Josephine. Many times it seems to me that the people conceive of their relationship with Josephine as if this fragile being, in need of indulgence, remarkable in some way, according to her own song, was entrusted to him. The reason is not clear to anyone, but the fact is indisputable. We must not laugh at what has been entrusted to us. It would be missing a duty. The greatest malignancy of which the most malignant are capable consists of saying, "Our laughter ends when we see Josephine." This is how the town takes care of Josephine, as a father takes care of the son who offers him his hand. It is not known if to ask or to demand. It could be thought that our people are incapable of those paternal duties, but he fills them in an exemplary way. At least in this case, no individual would be capable of what the people do together. By the way, the difference in strength between the whole people and an individual is immense. It is enough for the town to host its protégé with the warmth of its proximity for it to be safe. Of course, no one dares to discuss these things with Josephine. "I don't care about your protection," she says. "You're right, rather we are the ones who should take care of you," we think to ourselves. And besides, there is no contradiction if she rebels against us. They are only childish ways and gratitude, and the father's way is not to take them into account. There is something else more difficult to explain, in the relations of the town with Josephine. Josephine thinks, on the contrary, that it is she who protects the town. And it would seem, indeed, that their song saves us from bad political or economic situations. When it doesn't drive away misfortune, it even gives us the strength to bear it. Josephine doesn't say so exactly, because she doesn't speak much, and she's silent compared to us. But this affirmation shines in her eyes and can be read in her closed mouth. Very few of us can keep their mouths shut. She does. At each piece of bad news, and there are periods when bad news abounds daily, including false and half-true news, Josephine immediately stands up, she who, in general, drags herself tiredly on the ground, straightens up, stretches neck and tries to dominate his flock with his eyes, like a shepherd facing a storm. It is true that there are children with similar claims, but these claims are not without more foundation in Josephine than in children. She does not save us or give us no force, of course, and it is easy to see yourself as a savior after the fact of this town so accustomed to misfortune, not at all indulgent with itself, quick to make decisions, well aware of death, only fearful in appearance, within the atmosphere of recklessness in which he always lives and, furthermore, as fruitful as he is risky. It is easy, I say, To make the savior after the fact of this people who always knew how to save themselves in one way or another, even if it was through sacrifices that make the historical researcher tremble with fear. In general, we completely neglect historical research. And yet, it is true that in distressing situations we hear Josephina's voice better than other times. The threats hanging over us make us calmer, more modest, more docile to Josephina's mandate. Gladly we gather, gladly huddle together, especially since the motive is now so different from the dominant torture. It's as if we quickly drank together. Yes, we have to hurry. Josephina forgets this too many times. Still a cup of peace before the fight. It is less a singing concert than a popular meeting, and a meeting, by the way, in which we all remain silent, except for Josephina. The hour is too serious to waste in talk. Naturally, these circumstances do not satisfy Josephina. Despite all her restlessness and nervousness, there are things that she often does not see. Her conceit blinds her, and also, without much effort, she can be made to miss many more, since a swarm of sycophants takes care of this. But, singing unnoticed, in second order, or in a corner of a popular assembly, never that. Which does not happen, because his art does not go unnoticed. Although deep down we are busy with something else, and not only because of the song we remain silent, and many do not even look at her, burying their noses in their neighbor's skin, and Josephina up there seems to be agitating in vain. There is no doubt that something of her scream reaches us. This shriek that rises above the obligatory general silence is almost a message from the people to the individual. Josephina's subdued scream, in the midst of serious decisions, is almost like the miserable existence of our town in the midst of the enemy tumult. Josephina asserts herself and makes her way to us. It is comforting to think that no voice, that no skill, is affirmed. If a true singing artist could exist among us, we would not bear him at such times. We would unanimously reject his concert as nonsense. Let's hope that Josephina doesn't discover that the mere fact of hearing it is evidence against her singing. She definitely catches a glimpse of him. That is why she denies so ardently that we listen to her. However, it always sings again, to dissolve in its scream, beyond this suspicion. But she will always have a consolation. Perhaps we listen to her in the same way that one listens to a singing artist. And Josephina achieves effects that a great artist would try in vain to achieve, and that correspond precisely to her precarious vocal means. This is due, above all, to our way of life. Youth is ignored in our town. Hardly a minimum childhood is known. It is true that we guarantee children a special freedom, that we must recognize their right to some negligence and some mischief and help them a little. Nothing more plausible than such demands. Everyone recognizes them, but nothing less admissible in reality to our lives, and the efforts we make in this regard are ephemeral. With us, as soon as a child can run around a bit and find out what's around him, he already has to earn a living as an adult. The dispersed districts in which we live, for economic reasons, are too large. Our enemies are so numerous, and the dangers that lie ahead so incalculable, that we cannot keep children away from this fight for life. If they didn't fight, they too would die. To these sad causes is added another, very relevant, the fertility of our race. One generation pushes the other. Children do not have time to be children. In the other towns, the children are brought up with special care, and although schools are erected and streams flow from them, it is always, for a time, the same children who are educated there. We have no schools, and from our town, at very short intervals, they send countless flocks of children, hissing or peeping until they can scream. wallowing or rolling under the pressure of the crowd, until they can walk on their own, clumsily rolling their mass over everything they find, until they can see. And not like school children, who are always the same. No, always new, without end, without interruption. As soon as a child appears, he is no longer a child, and the new snouts push him, indistinguishable from their multitude and haste. As beautiful as this is, and as much as others envy us, we are not allowed to give our children a real childhood. This brings consequences. A perpetual and deep-rooted childishness permeates our town. In direct contrast to our best condition, which is practical understanding, we often act in the most foolish ways, just like children, thoughtless and generous spenders. And although our joy can no longer maintain the strength of childhood joy, something remains, without a doubt. Josephine has been taking advantage of this childishness for a long time. But our town is not only infantile, it is also prematurely old. We do not have youth, we are adults right away, and we will remain adults for so long that a certain despair and a certain weariness leave their mark on the applied and optimistic character of our people. That is perhaps the cause of our lack of musicality. You are too old for music, its agitation, its flight do not suit our heaviness. Tired, we reject it with a gesture, we have reduced ourselves to screaming. A few shrieks are enough for us, from time to time. It is possible that there are no musical talents among us, but, if there were, the character of our people would suppress them before the mature Josephine, on the other hand, can scream or sing or whatever she wants to call it. That doesn't bother us. We bear it well. If there is any music in sounds it emits, that music is minimal. A certain musical tradition is preserved in this way, without weighing us down. At her concerts, only the very young are interested in the singer, they look at her in amazement when she moves her lips and exhales between her small incisors, enthralled with her own tones. She languishes and uses this fall to highlight new abilities that are less and less understandable, even to herself. But the crowd remains collected and in suspense. We dream of the few truces of the struggle, it is as if one's legs became weak, it is as if we could, once, lie down and relax in the warm bed of the people. And in the middle of sleep, from time to time, Josephine's scream is heard. She says it's sparkling. It seems annoying to us. In this music there is something of our poor and short childhood, something of the lost joy that we will no longer find. But there is also something of our present active life, of its small, incomprehensible and yet so persistent vivacity. All this is not expressed in a big voice, but very slowly. Hissing in confidence, many times with hoarseness, by dint of shrieking, however faint they may be, since that is the language of our people, except that many shriek all their lives and not even. They don't even notice. Here, on the contrary, the scream is freed from the shackles of everyday life and frees us too, even if only for a moment. In truth, we would be ashamed not to hear these concerts. But from this to Josephine's affirmation that her music instills new strength, there is a great distance. I speak, clearly understood, of the common people and not of some unconditional supporters. How could it be any other way? The latter arrogantly say. How could one explain the large number of people, especially in moments of serious and immediate danger, and that has interfered, more than once, with our opportune defense against that same danger? Unfortunately, the latter is true, and it is not exactly a title of glory for Josephine, especially if we consider that many times the enemy dispersed our meetings, killing many of our people, and that Josephine, the culprit of everything, perhaps she attracted the enemy with her screaming dash, she always reserved the safest place for herself and disappeared first, with the complicity of her supporters. We all know it, and yet we rush to surround her every time she sings again. From this it could be deduced that Josephine is above the law, that she is allowed to do what she wants, even if it harms the community, and that everything is forgiven. If so, Josephine's claims would be explained. It could even be seen in this freedom that her people give her, in this extraordinary gift and, by the way, contrary to the laws, never granted to another, the recognition that her people, as she affirms, do not understand her, are amazed and astonished by her art and feeling unworthy of it, tries to compensate with a supreme favor that comes to death, the pains caused by his lack of understanding. Just as Josephine's art is out of the general reach, the town also places Josephine's person and her whims out of the power of their orders. In small matters, perhaps this is the case, perhaps the town capitulates too soon to Josephine. But it's not your hardcore addict. It is strange how badly that cunning woman calculates, so badly that one would think that she does not calculate, but that she is carried by the current of her destiny, that our world can only be sad. She herself turns away from the song, she herself destroys the power she had gained. How did he achieve that power, since he knows his people so poorly? It hides and does not sing, but the people, calm, without visible disappointment, noble, a mass resting in itself, which formally, although appearances are contrary, can only give gifts, never receive them, not even from Josephine. This town, I repeat, continues on its way. But Josephine must be in decline. Soon the moment will come when her last shriek will sound and she will be mute forever. Josephine is an episode in the eternal history of our town, and this town will overcome the loss. It will not be easy for us. How will assemblies be possible in complete silence? But, weren't they also silent with Josephine? Was her effective squeal, noticeably louder and more lively than it will be in memory? Was it, in life, more than a mere memory? Or have we exalted Josephine's song because it was unmissable? We may not lose much, but Josephine, redeemed from earthly toils, to which, according to her, the elect are predestined, will be lost jubilantly among the innumerable multitude of beings of our people, and soon, since we are not interested in history, she will enter, like all his brothers, in the exalted liberation of oblivion. For a long time, perhaps from the beginning of her career, Josephine has been fighting so that she is not forced to work, they should therefore exempt it from all economic concerns. An easy enthusiast, among us there were some, might think that the mere fact of formulating such a claim justifies it. But that's not how our people understand it and calmly rejects the singer's claim. Nor does it go to great lengths to refute the merits of the lawsuit. Josephine, for example, points out that work efforts damage the voice, that work deprives her of any possibility of resting after the song and of strengthening herself for the next performance, that in that form it is completely exhausted and cannot reach its maximum capacity. The people listen to her and move on to another matter. This people, so easy to move, also knows how to be insensitive. The rejection is sometimes so final that Josephine herself is surprised and seems to come to her senses. Then he works properly, he sings to the best of his ability. But then he returns to the charge. Deep down it is clear that Josephine does not really want what she wants. He is reasonable, he is not afraid of work, an unknown fear among us, and furthermore, if they granted him what he demands, he would continue living as usual, work would not prevent him from singing, the song would not be more beautiful. What Josephine wants is public, unanimous, enduring recognition of her art. This, though everything else seems accessible, stubbornly fails. Perhaps it would have been better for him to face the matter from another angle. Perhaps she herself admits the mistake. But you can't back out. It would seem disloyal to herself. It is obliged to continue until victory or death. If it were true that he has enemies, they could have fun with this fight, but she has no enemies, and even when she is criticized, this fight amuses no one. The town shows itself in the cold attitude of a judge. In the rejection of the people, as in Josephina's claim, what is significant is not the matter but the fact that we are implacable with a person whom, on the other hand, we paternally protect. If it were an individual instead of the people, one might believe that they had been giving in to Josephina's ardent requests, until finally getting tired and putting a stop to the concessions. One could also believe that they have agreed to all their demands in order to provoke one last outrageous demand and be able to reject it. But the people do not need such cunning, and their veneration for Josephina is sincere and proven. Furthermore, Josephina's vanity is so strong that even a child would have foreseen the result. However, it may be that given the idea that Josephina has made of the matter, such assumptions are also at stake and add bitterness to her pain. But even if she assumes these things, she does not let herself be scared off, and in recent times she has sharpened the fight. If before she used to fight with her words, now she begins to use other means, which, according to her, are more effective, but according to us, more dangerous for herself. Many believe that Josephina becomes so urgent because she is feeling old, her voice shows flaws, and it seems urgent to her to fight the last fight to be definitively recognized. I don't believe it. Josephina would not be her if this were true. For her there is neither old age nor weakening of the voice. When he wants something, it is not for superficial reasons but for intimate logic. Reach out to the highest crown. If it were up to her, she would hang it higher still. This contempt for external difficulties does not prevent him from using the most undignified means. His right seems indisputable to him. He also judges that dignified means would fail in this world. Perhaps for this very reason she has shifted the fight to another field, less important to her. His retinue have circulated sayings of his, according to which he is capable of singing in such a way as to give pleasure to the whole town. But, adds Josephina, one must not flatter the vulgar. Things must remain as they are. Thus, for example, the rumor spread that Josephina intends, if they don't please her, to shorten the trills. I don't understand anything about trills and I've never noticed them in their singing. But Josephina wants to shorten the trills, not suppress them, just shorten them. He has published his threat. For my part, have not noticed any difference between his recitals now and those of before. The people listen as always without manifesting themselves regarding the trills, and their behavior towards Josephina's claims has not changed. Josephina's way of thinking, like her figure, has something funny. Thus, for example, as if his decision regarding the trills were too ruthless, he later declared that he would sing his entire trills again from now on. But at the other concert she rethought it and decided that the great trills had ended and would not return except by a decision favorable to her. The people remain benevolent, but inaccessible, like a worried adult who does not listen to the words of a child. But Josephina does not give in. He recently stated that at work he had sustained an injury that prevented him from standing up while singing. Since you can only sing standing up, you must now shorten your chants. Although he limps and allows himself to be supported by his entourage, no one believes in his injury, even taking into account the special sensitivity of her body. It must not be forgotten that Josephina belongs to a town of workers. If we started to limp for every scratch on our skin, the whole town would walk on crutches. But that they take her as an invalid, that she is exhibited in that lamentable state, it doesn't matter. The people listen gratefully to their song and do not pay much attention to the abbreviation of the trills. Since he can't limp forever, he invented other things: tiredness, weakness, bad mood. We are condemned to see Josephina's entourage begging her for songs. They comfort her, flatter her, carry her almost on a litter to the chosen place. At last he consents with inexplicable tears, but when she is about to start, with her arms not open like other times, but dangling, which makes them seem short, when she wants to sing, an involuntary shudder breaks through her and she collapses before our eyes. Then she masters herself with energy and sings, I think more or less as always. Perhaps the one who notices the finest nuances distinguishes a slight excitement that favors it. In the end, she seems less tired than before. She walks confidently, if it is permissible to speak like that of an elusive kick, and she walks away, refusing all help from her courtiers and coldly challenging the respectful crowd that makes way for her. However, the last time her song was expected, Josephine disappeared. Now not only is her entourage looking for her, many enroll in the search. Josephine has disappeared. She doesn't want to sing nor does she want to be asked. Now he has completely abandoned us.